Hello and welcome. This time we're going to be looking at Crimson Vow. Once again, it's a collector's booster, but this one has a slight difference in that, boom, it comes with two fabulous box toppers, and the packets this time are made of a durable, well, more durable than normal, which means that opening them is it's a real pain. But first off, for the vampire wedding, we have box toppers, which it's been a while since we've had box toppers. I think the last time was Ikoria, where we had the Godzilla. This time we have Dracula, or at least some bits from from Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, and a majority from all the movies that then followed. But let's have a look at what's in our first box topper. So, while I'm not the best person to talk about vampire lore with, because let's be honest, I don't know a whole bunch, I have read the novel and I can tell you that it is very, 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 very different from any other media that followed. So the first one we have for our box topper, if I can get it out, is none other than Lucy Westenra. So she's nice, very foily, very flippy. She's actually Innocent Traveller is the actual name of the card from the set, which is an uncommon, but one of the good things about box toppers is that they're always going to be the Dracula cards and they're always going to be the foil, which means that it looks really nice on some of them. On others, it looks okay. I mean, oddly enough, none of them really suffer from the foiling, which I think is a good thing. But until Wizards manage to find some kind of process of foiling that doesn't cause the cards to bend over a period of time, then it'd be nice. And for the next one, we have Dr. John Seward. Hooray! I mean, it's a rare, which is why it's hooray, but other than that, the card is okay, because the actual card is Tauren's Fist of the Angels. So, Dr. John Seward, it's only a single, no flippy. And he has training, which is basically the reverse of mentor, which is nice, because whenever it attacks with something that has more power than it, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, which is pretty cool. And whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human creature soldier token with training. Which again is good, but it's mainly going to be used in the human tribals. So with Sagata, and that's going to be it, really. But these are the two box toppers. And now we can move on, because we'll have the Draculas in their own little pile. Now we can move on to the actual cards. Now, being collector's boosters, it means that we also have an increased chance of getting a Dracula card, which is always really good. Mainly because they look good, but who doesn't want a foil Dracula? Which is actually the Soren Markov one. So, here we have mostly foils. We got some nice regular commons. The uncommons, which is Retrieve, which is good for Dredge, or whatever you want to call it. Infestation Expert, which I actually think is kind of nice. It's a human werewolf that produces bugs, and I think it's kind of cool, particularly since there aren't many things that produce insects. And the reason why I say that is mainly because I was kind of hoping that we'd get more insects so we can feed Grish. as a commander, but Grisha's commander just annoys me because she has the potential to be good, but because she's constantly self-milling yourself and wants a whole bunch of stuff in your graveyard, it kind of hurts a bit. Because you want that nice balance of a whole bunch of insects in your graveyard and everything else in your deck. Which, of course, isn't really going to happen. Foil, full art, swamp, which is nice because it's in the midnight style, and I really like that midnight style. I mean, sure, some people jack up again about the new double feature that's coming out, and I'll be honest, I'm one of those people, because just turning everything black and white and then printing it is not a good thing to do, especially if you're just turning it black and white and shoving 2 sets into one. I mean, come on, that's... Especially when you told us originally it was going to be a cultivated set for draft. This is just 2 sets in one. That's not a cultivated set for draft. So next we have a foil Headless Rider, which is good for zombies. Because whenever it or another zombie creature you control dies, it creates a 2/2. And not a 2/2 with Decayed. It's just a regular 2/2, which is great. The commander card, which is Breath of the Sleepless, which is excellent for spirit decks. Spirit commander decks, because you can't really play it in anything else. Concealing Curtains. I want to like this card, but I can't. So it starts out as just a 1-drop 0/4 defender, which is good. But then you can pay 3 to transform it, which transforms it into the Revealing Eye, which is Menace, which again is good. And then when it's transformed, you look at your opponent's hand, you look at an opponent's hand, choose a non-land card from it, and they discard that, and then you draw a card. It's not bad, but the problem is that it's basically a 4-drop, and there's better things that you can do. I mean, again, it's not a bad card, it's just I'm not a big fan of it. But that's a rare. So now we have the other alternates. So we've got the Dracula, and we've also got the Midnight cards that are back again. But at the same time, much like we had with the Midnight Hunt ones, where you had the sort of autumnal cards, like this one here, which is the Brutal Cathar, which flips into the Moonrage Brute. This time we've got the Vampire, or the Wedding style. And for that we have Markov Purifier. So you get the regular card with slightly different art, but you get this nice sort of weird bat-like border, which kind of works sometimes. And then of course we have our Van Helsing's Holy Ward, which is the Dracula card. Ooh. Yeah. And, ooh! So we have an alternate art, Sorin the Merciless. Not merciless, mirthless. He's not happy. He's Edgelord Sorin again. And that's the alternate art. So much like there was for Midnight Hunt, there's 3 alternate arts. You have the Dracula art, the regular art, and the slightly alternate art, which is the Vampire Wedding art, which is the one we have here. And that's a mythic. Vampire Wedding version of Falconrith Celebrants. That's a common, that goes in the common pile. Ascent and Pack Leader, which is actually a really good card if you're playing werewolves, or wolves in general. Because enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater, and whenever something with a mana value 4 or greater enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on Ascent and Pack Leader. So it just keeps getting bigger, which is great. And then our treasure token, which is an eye for a red wolf. Ugh. Alright, Now that's... So, ultimately, not a bad pack, especially since we got Soren. Soren's a good one to get. He doesn't really do that much as he used to, but he produces bats and he basically deals 13 damage. Which is a lot better than his other one, which was you deal... Wait, no, that was much better. Because the old Soren was everyone's life becomes 10. So you play it in Commander game and go, bam, everyone's life is now 10. Suck it. So next pack, we've got a few commons, which I'm not going to go through. Nothing that really stands out in the commons in this set anyway. This set has been rather funny because, well, it's an interesting set. Because there's a couple of good cards and then a couple of really bad cards, and then you look at it in Commander and you're then left wondering whether or not you have good cards or bad cards. So it's kind of an interesting set. I was hoping for a bit more, but 2 sets in Innistrad, I'm not complaining. And the next set is Kamigawa Revisited, where it's Neo Tokyo. So, an island, Halpak Piper. It can't be countered. Pay 1 and a green, tap to put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If it's a wolf or werewolf, untap Halpak Piper, activate as a sorcery. So this card is going in my werewolf deck because it's decent. And, well, I mean, it's basically a way of cheating werewolves onto the field, which is excellent. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into a Windsong Howler, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Oh, so it's like that one from original Innistrad, the other werewolf. I think Dawnbreaker something? Anyway, that was a green card that basically did that. It was great, and is in my deck. And that is also going in my deck. Sudden Salvation, from the Commander deck, straight out. Kessig Wolf Rider. Menace, exile 3 cards from your graveyard to create a 3/2 red wolf creature token, which is not bad, but it's kind of your own graveyard hate, so I mean, it works. I got nothing to complain about there. Blood Petal Celebrant as the alternate art. Alluring Suitor. When you attack with exactly 2 creatures, transform Alluring Suitor into none other than Deadly Dancer. Transforms. When it transforms into Deadly Dancer, add 2 red to your mana pool. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end, which is always nice. And for 2 red, Deadly Dancer and another type creature get +1/+0 until end of turn. That's the kind of card that works really well in Draft and can work in Standard, but it's not bad. It's just not, yeah. Ooh, wow, we're really racking up the mythics now. Sisters of the Undead, which is the alternate of Olivia Crimson Bride. So she is flying, or they have flying haste, and whenever they attack, return target creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature. And that's for 6. Now, I know I've known or read a number of articles, watched a number of videos. Despite what people are divided on it because she's expensive, but she's really good because she can keep bringing your vampires back, which is, again, really good, but they only stick around for as long as they've got a legendary. Now, the caveat there is that obviously if you reanimate a legendary creature that comes into play as a vampire, or if you happen to reanimate a legendary vampire, it means that it keeps itself alive in perpetuity because it's, a legendary vampire. But the drawback is that it's expensive to cast, and once, of course, you cast it, you know that someone's going to counter it or kill it outright. So it's a bit of a... I mean, I like it. I think it's a good card. That's the kind of card that makes me go, yes, this is Commander. Because if you're playing it in Standard, then it's sort of like, okay, but I'm not really getting much value out of it, because you cast it and you hope that you've got at least 7 vampires, but then again, it's got Flying Haste and is a 3/4. Alternatively, you've got, if you're pulling it in draft, then you're clearly doing it for a rare draft. Like, there's really no reason. I mean, 6 in a draft, by the time, it's a nice bomb, but it's a 3/4 and it's not going to do any... 3/4 with Flying and Haste, it's not really going to do much in a draft. Because, yes, Flying is great in a draft, but you know someone's just going to kill it with one of the many different kill spells that are available in both Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. Unholy Officiant. Yep. Ooh! Wow, we're really racking up the mythics. So, Cemetery. We have the Cemetery Desiccator, which is one of the 5 different cemeteries. So each colour has its own cemetery something, like Cemetery Protector, which is white, Cemetery Illuminator, which is blue. Each one, and this one's the black one, Cemetery Desecrator, which has got Menace. When it enters the battlefield or dies, exile another card from a graveyard. When you do, choose one. You can remove X counters from target permanent, where X is the mana value of the exiled card, and it's target permanent, which means it's great for killing planeswalkers. Target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. So basically, it can kill something. And the downside is that it is 6. The upside, and it's a 4/4, which is, it's kind of that mid-range. 4 is a nice mid-range because most red cards deal like 3, 2, 1, or 5, and very few deal 4, which means that they can't just piff something at it, they have to piff something at it twice, or they're spending a lot to deal 5 damage to something that they might, not care too much about. Oddly enough, though, with Cemetery Desecrator, I'm pretty sure that they care whether or not it dies. Because, well, anything that kills anything that basically kills off your planeswalkers and creatures is not a good thing to have sticking around. So once again, a few commons. You have a couple of uncommons. Forest. Now we have a Creepy Puppeteer, which isn't bad. I think this was the one that Loading Ready Run did. But whenever it attacks, if you attacked with exactly one other creature, you may have that creature's base power and toughness become 4/3 until end of turn. And that's pretty good, because you attack with Creepy Puppeteer and you attack with a 1/1 and suddenly it's a 4/3. Opponent's getting 2 4/3s in the face. Always nice. Thundering Nightmare. Now this is a commander card, but this is one of the extra 8 commander cards. So there were extra commander... So as with Midnight Hunt, what they did is they introduced in Collector's Boosters that you can get commander cards, which are these ones here, or you can get one of 8 extra commander cards. So these are commander cards that were designed for commander, but were never actually put into any of the decks. They're just 8 floating ones in Collector's Booster. And they are 5 Soul Bonders, of which this is one of them. The Thundering Nightmare. Then there was the Cemetery Overlook, or something like that, which is a wolf that pumps out other 2/2 wolves. There is the Umbrus, which is Umbrus the Fear Manifest, which is a commander card, as in an actual commander. It's a legendary creature that basically cares about tribal horrors and nightmares, which is fun, but there aren't that many good horrors and nightmares. Well, none that stand out immediately. And the other one is the Wedding Ring, which is really fun, and I hope I pull one so then I can read it out to you, because it can do some nasty stuff, even though it's white, which is annoying. Anyway, Thundering Nightmare. It is soul bond, which means when it comes into play, you bond it with another creature in play. Both creatures have whatever it says. So, as long as Thundering Nightmare is paired with another creature, each of those creatures has, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Which is great, because Soul Bonding came into play in Avacyn Restored, I'm pretty sure. And never again, because it was revealed that it was actually too powerful. Well, there were several cards that were revealed to be too powerful of a mechanic, because what can happen is you play a Soul Bond, and you can bond it with another creature with Soul Bond. So then both those creatures that are soul bonded to each other get both the soul bonded abilities. Like Deadeye Navigator was one that was abused a lot, which is basically you can bounce it back to hand. Bounce it or the soul bonded creature back to hand, which is great. But that's soul bonding, and that's commander card. Path of Peril, which is 3 to destroy all creatures with a mana value 2 or less, or with Cleave, which costs 4, a white and a black, you can destroy all creatures. I don't know how to feel about Cleave. So Cleave is a mechanic where what it does is it removes part of the text that's in square brackets if you pay the Cleave cost. And it's a good way of making cards cheap to do one thing, but you pay the alternate cost and it basically becomes a better version. And I'm okay with that, because there have been several like that with kickers and stuff like that. But one thing that I found consistently is that the Cleave cost is really expensive. So, Path of Peril is 3-drop to destroy all creatures with mana value 2 or less. That's fair. I mean, that's about on par. But then, by paying 4, a white and a black, so that's a total of 6, you can destroy all creatures. Most destroy all creatures, whether they be in black or white, tend to be about a 5-drop. And that's in almost every other set. You know, it tends to be a 5-drop, so making it cost 1 more and or forcing white or black into the equation sort of makes it not really playable. Because, you're not, like, if you had a choice between, I want to say Shatter the Sky, which is from Return to Theros, which is cycled out, but, you know, if you want to play something like Shatter the Sky versus Path of Peril, you're going to pick Shatter the Sky. Because Path of Peril will make you pay 6 for the same thing that Shatter the Sky does for 5. Because that 1 mana actually matters. So I don't mind the mechanic of Cleave, of being able to remove stuff by paying an alternate cost. That's fine. But the whole idea behind it is that you can make things cheaper. So, like, Path of Peril can... So, in other words, to destroy all creatures can be cheaper than it usually is, because you can pay the alternate cost. But the alternate cost is always a lot higher than the standard card would be. Which is just... alternate art of Unholy Officiant, Gluttonous Guest. We have another John Stewart. This one not so foily. But still, it's Dracula. It's Dracula. Alternate art Bloodsworn Squire. Ooh. Alternate art Welcoming Vampire. Flying. Whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, and it's white, which is perfect because that goes really well hand in hand with white, because they have a lot of white weenies. And we have a Dawnheart Disciple, which is yay. It's a common, it's a foil. It's really nothing to write home about because it's a common, it's a foil. So let's just ignore it and move on. Where we'll just get rid of the commons. We have a Markov Waltzer, which is not bad. It's a decent card. It was one of the first ones that was spoiled. Distracting Geist, which is one of the new things, because previously we had Disturb, which was a human comes back as a spirit. Now we've got spirits that come back as enchantments. So that's basically the gimmick of this whole set with spirits. So previously it was, we have humans, they die, they come back as spirits. Now we've got spirits that die and come back as enchantments, which sort of works, but I still prefer the idea of a creature dying and getting a creature back, because what it does is it takes a spirit deck from being spirits to being mainly enchantments, which means that blanket enchantment removals hurt a lot. Welcoming Vampire. Why, thank you. Which is exactly the same as the previous Welcoming Vampire, only this one is not so fancy. I mean, it's foil, which is always fancy, but it's not the alternate art. Now we have a commander card from one of the commander decks, which is Camber the Plunderer, which is, it's an okay card. We have Voldaren Estate. So the alternate... So it's not a bad card, it's mainly a vampire card, because you tap to add colourless, you can tap and pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any colour, as long as you're using it to cast a vampire, or you can spend 5 and tap to create a blood token, and it costs 1 less for each vampire you control. So that means that if you control 5 vampires, you can tap it to create a blood token. Which, honestly, I'm not 100% sure on how to feel about blood tokens, because they sort of feel like a lesser version of Investigate, but yeah, because Investigate is basically, you get a clue token, you pay 2, tap and crack it to draw a card. Whereas for blood tokens, it's you get a blood token, you pay 1, you tap and crack it, and you discard a card and draw a card. And it's like, it can work, but I think its main thing is basically to give red access to Investigate, because Investigate was mainly blue. And now most of the red have create blood tokens, which is fair, because it goes hand in hand with the colour, but it's like, there are a number of colours artifacts that just produce clues, so... But anyway, Voldaren Estate is nice. Its alternate, which was a buy a box promo, is Dracula's Castle. So that goes there. Belligerent Guest, alternate art. We have one Quincy Harker, which is, of course, a Dracula card. So obviously he was the betrothed to Mina Harker, and I think he's the one who died, and Mina, according to different sources, got turned into a vampire. Depends on what movie, what version of the... Well, honestly, was Mina the... it's been so long since I actually read Dracula. I remember it being thoroughly underwhelming, because none of the action happens until like the last 2 chapters, which is where they find Dracula and then kill him, and like that's it. There's no real other confrontation. It's just mainly trying to work out what this strange Spanish flu is. So then we have an alternate, or the midnight art for Kalia, the Dawnheart Martyr, which is actually can be pretty scary in a commander deck as the commander. So Kalida has... Catilda has flying lifelink protection from vampires. Protection from vampires is specific, but that's okay because there was one in Midnight Hunt that had protection from werewolves. So, Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr's power and toughness are equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. Okay, spirit deck, here you come. And it has Disturb, which is Catilda's Rising Dawn. Enchant creature has flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires, and it gets +X, where X is the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or enchantments. So, wow. And then, of course, if it would be put into the graveyard, you exile it instead, because that's what the spirits do now. Which makes sense, because once you kill a spirit, you certainly hope it's gone. But that's also in the Midnight Art. So we have Midnight Art Catilda, followed by what appears to be her head. It's actually her body, but it still looks like they've cut off her head. That goes in the rares. So now we have Mysterious Blood Illness, which is one of the Dracula ones, followed by Renfield, Delusional Minion. And if there's one reason why I keep saying it like that is I'm pretty sure that that's how it's said for Dracula Dead and Loving It, which is obviously a comedy. But it was just such a funny one. Especially since it had Leslie Nielsen in it. At least I think it was Leslie Nielsen. But, yes. Because he kept doing the over-the-top vampire voice, you know. I want to suck your blood. And it would always be something like, Renfield, go get me a soda. There are a lot of fun vampire movies out there. Pax on Pup, which is basically like Ascendant Wolf, only slightly lesser. Because when it dies, you gain life. But whenever you play a wolf or werewolf, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It's nifty. An alternate art island. Again. So next is Aerith the Tormented Prophet, of which we've already basically seen, because that's this one, Renfield. So, it's a very blue-red card, and it reminds me of one of my old mates that I used to play Commander with, who would always play the decks that draw a whole bunch of cards. So basically hers is, if you would draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library instead. You may play those cards this turn. So it's one of those cards where if you know what you're doing, it is amazing and very powerful. If you don't know what you're doing, then you can still play it and get some value out of it. But again, you won't be using it to its best ability, which is basically you want to draw a whole bunch of cards so you can play them. Well, so you get options of playing. And to be fair, that friend would basically just fill his deck with, burn and counters, so... But that's a good one. Markov Enforcer, unfortunately that's one that's straight from the decks, the Commander decks. Splendid Reclamation. Return all lands cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. That's great, especially if someone's just pulled an Armageddon on you. Or Strip Mine, or basically done any of that. If you're playing a Gitrog, or even the new one, Golnark, or Golrak, or whatever. I don't know. I call it Tiddalik after Tiddalik the frog story, which is I think, an Australian story. Or Dreaming story. Dreamtime story. It's basically about a frog who drank an entire lake. And then various animals tried to get him to laugh to spill the lake. Anyway, it's a story. It's one that stuck with me, so I call the frog Tiddlick. But it's good for those kind of cards because basically you're going to be milling a whole bunch. So any lands, you can then go bam, back into play, baby. Voldaren Epicure, alternate art. Another Bloodsworn Vampire Squire, alternate art. Mina Harker. We had her betrothed before, Quincy. Now we've got Mina, which is basically just the reprint of Thalia, Guardian of Therebin, which is non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. It's not the other one that's played frequently, which is the creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped. Anyway, Bloodcrazed Socialite, which is a common. Voice of the Blessed. Spirit Cleric, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Voice of the Blessed. Woo! As long as Voice of the Blessed has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it is Flying Vigilance. If it has 10 or more, it is indestructible. Now, I haven't played with this card, but I played against it online, and it can be scary. But that was only because they had something that constantly was putting counters on it. Like, they weren't gaining a whole bunch of life, but they had things that just proliferated and basically doubled all counters, and it was kind of scary. So, next up, we have Gift of Fates, which is a common, which I'm pretty sure is the one that's, the alternate art is the one that's on the booster packs. I'm not 100% sure, I haven't seen the alternate art, so what do I know? More commons, an Undead Butler for an uncommon, and Into the Night, which is, I'm tempted to put it in my werewolf deck because it basically makes things night, because, you know, its first line is it becomes night, but I'm umming and ahhing about it. It's on the sideboard for now. And Full Art Forest, an Inspired Idea, which is 3-drop, but with Cleave it's 5, so you can draw 3 cards, your maximum hand size is reduced to 3 for the rest of the game, and that's for 3. Or you can draw 3 cards full stop for 5. Now, drawing 3 cards full stop for 5 is a perfectly fine, balanced, makes sense, alternate cost. The 3, to draw 3 cards and then reduce your hand for 3, is, I don't like it. Because, I mean, yes, you have things that, like, you have no maximum hand size, but I don't like the idea of paying, like, more often than not, the 3 cost is draw 3, discard 2, or put 2 back, or something like that. It would have made sense if it was draw 3, discard 3, with the discard 3 being part of the cleave. But draw 3 and then having your hand reduced to 3 for the rest of the game. Late game probably doesn't matter too much, but I don't like that. Sign of Opulence, which is straight from the Commander deck. Hopeful Initiate, which is training, and for 3 you can remove 2 +1/+1 counter from among creatures you control to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Artifact or enchantment removal, always good. Wedding Security, alternate art of Falconeth. Ooh! So here we have the Dracula version of the 3 Weird Sisters, which is actually Henrika Domranthe. But basically she is one card that I was sort of gunning for because I think she might be interesting in Commander. She's flying at the beginning of your turn. Choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. Or you transform Henrika Domranthe. Now she costs 4. Which means that at the beginning of your combat you can transform her. But if you do, boom, You get Fiends of the Darkest Night, or Henrika Infernal Seer, which is Flying Death Touch lifelink. Fantastic, especially since it's on a 3/4. For 3, each creature you control with Flying, Death Touch and lifelink gains +1/+0 until end of turn. So she basically can turn herself into a 4/4. So she's actually really good. She's a mythic. Here's the 3 Weird Sisters. The art on it is actually really nice. And I'm actually happy that I got her, because she seems interesting. Because what you do is you pay 4, and then you go to combat, transform her, hopefully she has haste or something, and then you pay 3 and give her 4 and swing. It's great. Markov Pilferer, which is fine. Alternate art. Ooh, alternate art of Odric Bloodcursed. So this was an interesting one. This one was one that was talked about by Maro, which is a previously normal human is now a vampire. And it's Odric. When Odric Bloodcursed enters the battlefield, create X blood tokens, where X is the number of abilities among Flying, First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample, and Vigilance from among creatures you control. So basically, like his old one where he gave everyone the same abilities, this time he's creating a whole bunch of blood tokens, which basically means that you get to draw cards. I mean, that's always good. Again, not 100% sold on the blood tokens. I can understand them. I just not 100% sold on them. Next pack, we have Blood Crazed Socialite. Syncopate, which is basically a counterspell, which is good. Because, Lord needs we need more counterspells. Markov Retribution. Biolumeg. I kind of like it because it's a callback to Ludovic's test subject, which was one card that made me really want to get Ludovic, and then Ludovic turned out to be blue-red and kind of okay. So I lost my heart because poor Ludovic. But Biolumeg is nice. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 2. When you sacrifice Biolumeg, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, which is Biolume Serpent, which sacrifices 2 islands, and it can't be blocked this turn. So a bit of a hefty price, but it's a decent for a 4/4. Full Art Plains, another Ascendant Pack Leader, huzzah. A Spectral Arcanist, which unfortunately is straight from the Spirit deck. So, ooh, a Faithbound Judge. Wow, we're really doing well on the Mythics today. So, Faithbound Judge, Defender Flying, Vigilance. At the beginning of upkeep, if your Faithbound Judge has 2 or fewer Judgment counters on it, put a Judgment counter on it. As long as Faithbound Judge has 3 or more Judgment counters on it, you can attack as though it didn't have Defender. And for Disturb, so if it dies, boom, Sinner's Judgment, which is one of the few white curses. Enchant player at the beginning of your upkeep, put a Judgment counter on Sinner's Judgment. Then if there are 3 more Judgment counters on it, Enchanted player loses the game. Which is one of the very few cards that basically outright state that player loses. It's usually you win. If Sinner's Judgment will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So, actually a pretty powerful card if you can get it off. Otherwise, it's decent. I mean, it's 3 for a 4/4. Sure, it's got Defender, Flying, Vigilance, but you just wait 3 turns and boom. Unholy Efficient, Alternate Art of Gluttonous Guest, another Mina Haka, Blood Tithe Harvester, an Investigator's Journal, which enters the battlefield with a number of suspect counters equal to the greatest number of creatures a player controls. And then, of course, you can pay 2 tap to remove a counter to draw a card, or you can pay 2 to sacrifice it to draw a card. So either way, you're getting some value out of it. I like it. And it's probably going to go into my Eldrazi deck, because Eldrazi definitely needs more draw. People hate my Eldrazi deck. I honestly don't understand why. It's very slow, and it still needs a ton more draw. But I suppose I understand, because, it's Eldrazi. So now we have a few more commons, uncommons, forest, another faithbound judge, this time foil. Ooh! Millicent, Restless Revenant. Alright, so that's the main card from the Spirit Commander deck. Rats. Was kind of hoping for Umbris. Demonic Bargain, which is fine. Exile the top 13 cards of your library, then search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. It works. I mean, it costs 3. It's really nothing bad about that. Sure, you're gambling, but it's only 13 cards. In a standard deck, it would hurt a lot. In EDH, it hurts, but not as much. Alternate art, Quincy Harker. Ooh, full art, Stormcarved Coast. Nice. This is part of the land cycle. Lucy Westerner, which is, again, a foil. Golnock, the Omnivore. This is the one that I was calling Tidlick before. So whenever it costs 4, 2 green and blue. Whenever a frog you control attacks, you mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent is put into a graveyard from your library, you exile it with a Croak counter on it. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with Croak counters on them. Basically, it exiles your deck with counters on them, and then of course you can cast for as long as they've got that counter on it. But because they're exiled, that means that they can't be touched. Ooh. It's not bad. I played against it the other day with a friend as the commander, and it worked really well because what he did is I forgot what card it was, but it basically made everyone a copy of one target card. So he targeted Golnock, swung with everything, and basically milled himself to death. Except for it wasn't to death, because he then played Lab Maniac and won. Because stupid Lab Maniac. Well, actually it was overkill, because he had Lab Maniac and the Jace that has the same ability. So, poo. So, we have a number of commons, uncommons, Full Art Island, which is nice. Thalia, this time we have an actual Thalia and not a Mina Harker. So, yay. Sinister Waltz, which again is from the Commander decks. Alchemist Gamble, which is 3 to take an extra turn after this one. During that turn, damage can't be prevented. And at the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. That's for 3. You can pay 4, 2 blue and a red to take an extra turn. Damage during that turn can't be prevented. Now, the funny thing with this is, 1, the costing is actually really well placed, because 3 to take an extra turn is amazing. But then you lose at the beginning of that turn's end step, which is sad. But the cleave cost also makes up for, taking an extra turn and preventing damage. But with Alchemist Gambit, if you have Sundial, what you can do, Sundial of the Infinite if I recall, but if you have Sundial, basically what you do is you play it, and then you, boom, end turn, which basically means that the end thing doesn't trigger, so you get a free turn, an extra turn. It's great. Sculpting Killer, Alternate Art, we have Restless Bloodseeker, and Dracula, Blood Immortal. This is one of the 3 Dracula. There's Dracula, Blood Immortal, which is Falcon with Forebearer, which is this one. Then you have Dracula, which is the Soren, and then the other Dracula, whose name escapes me. It's the transforming one, the flippy. But it is flying, it can't block, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a blood token. You can pay 1 to sacrifice 2 blood tokens to return Falcon with Forebearer from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a good card. It's excellent in draft. It's okay in standard. It's pretty good in Commander. It's an all-round good card, especially for 3 for a 3/1. It dies, you don't care that much because you can bring it back. Alternate Blood Petal Celebrant. And Dorothea, Vengeful Victim, Midnight Art. So it's white and a blue. It is flying. Whenever it attacks or blocks, you sacrifice it at the end of combat. Sad. It's a 4/4. But it has Disturb as one, a white and a blue. For Dorothea's Retribution, which is an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Creature has, whenever this creature attacks, create a 4/4 white spirit creature token with flying that's tapped and attacking. Sacrifice that token at the end of combat. So basically, it just keeps propagating itself. It's not bad. Because you use it once, she dies, and then you move on. Alright, moving on quickly. We have commons, a couple of uncommons, Full Art Mountain, which is nice, Hullbreaker Horror, which is flash, it can't be countered, and whenever you cast a spell, choose up to one, you can return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, so basically a pseudo counter, and return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. The only problem is, yes, it's a 7/8, which is great, but in order to do all that kind of stuff, you need to have 7, which is 5 and 2 blue. So, Predator's Hour, which is, again, straight from the Commander decks. Ooh, Cemetery Illuminator. Woo! I was looking forward to this one, because I was hoping to build a Spirit deck. But whenever Cemetery Illuminator enters, it is flying. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you exile a card from a graveyard. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Once each turn, you may cast a spell from the top of your library that shares a card type with a card exiled with Cemetery Illuminator. So it exiles cards and then basically goes, cool, as long as it shares a card type exiled, then you can cast it. And to make life easier, it costs 1, 2 blue, and is a 2/3. So it's not exactly hard on the eyes either. It's quite a good card. You have Belligerent Guest, Lucy Westerner. Oh, we have an Unja. This was one of the ones that people are trying to make commander decks out of. So she was first revealed as in one of the commander decks. I can't remember, but she was Anya or something. Now she's a Maid of Dishonor, and whenever she enters the battlefield, whenever she and or one or more other vampires enter the battlefield under your control, you create a blood token. It triggers only once each turn. You can pay 2, sacrifice another creature or a blood token, and each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. She's not bad, especially since she's a 2 black red for a 4/5, which is pretty dang good. So next we have Gluttonous Guest, another Alchemist Gambit, and that's it. Excellent. So as you can see, we actually got decent amount, and a few that I'm actually really happy for, like the Sisters of the Undead. From the set, I'm still hoping to get all the Dracula cards, because I really, really want to, but now that I got one that I was hoping for, which is the Weird Sisters. There we are. Nope. Oh, right, they're here. Got one that I was really hoping for, which is the Weird Sisters. I think there's only one other card that I'm missing, and I can't remember what it is. But, So I think that's good, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining me.